Before we call the meeting to order, I just want to recite certain house rules for the meeting. Number one, please be advised that microphones of non-program participants will be muted to help keep the background noise to a minimum. Number two, may we request the visiting Rotarians and guests to please type in the comment box your name, your club or affiliation, or the Rotarians who invited you to participate in this meeting so we can properly acknowledge you later in the program. Number three, for our open forum after the talk of the speaker, in case you want to ask a question, please use the raise hand button or simply notify us by typing in the comment box. Alternatively, you may want to type in your question and we will try to accommodate it during the Q&A. And lastly, please don't leave after the response of our president, as we will be having a group photo op with our speaker. With that, I would like to ask President Louis Asioche to call the meeting to order.
Hello. By the powers vested in me by the Rotary Club of Makati, I call this meeting to order.
Now I'd like to call our invocator, President nominee Keith Harrison, and may I ask everybody to please stand.
Will you please bow your heads with me? Let us pray together, each of us according to our individual beliefs. Let us welcome our guests and Rotarians, our club members and members of the many other clubs here today with open arms. Let us especially welcome RI Vice-President Valarie Wafer and her husband Mark, who safely flew in from Canada just the other day. And also our speaker, Carl Cunanan. Let us offer thanks for our food and those who prepared it. Let us offer blessings for one another. Let us be a source of hope for those in need and contentment for those who are lonely. Let us be a beacon for peace in what seems to be an ever divided world. Let us give gratitude for our opportunity to serve Rotary. Indeed, let us serve to change lives. Let the feelings of love, kindness, and Rotary spirit always be reflected in our actions. For this we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen to that, Keith. Thank you for a lovely prayer. Please remain standing. We will now have the national anthem of South Korea, of Canada, and the Philippines. please remain standing. Last but not least, our Rotary hymn.
We're the Rotary Club of Makati, and together we stand proud. We are leaders with integrity, always ready to serve humanity, always living by the four-way test, building goodwill and peace along the way, giving hope to the world. We're the Rotary Club of Makati, prepared to aid our fellow men. As true Rotarians we live to lead. We believe in service above self, and this is why we succeed. We're the Rotary Club of Makati, and together we stand proud. We are leaders with integrity, always ready to serve humanity, always living by the four-way test, building goodwill and peace along the way, giving hope to the world. We're the Rotary Club of Makati, giving hope to the world. The Rotary Club of Makati.
Thank you. Please take your seats. Okay, speaking of the four-way test, we will now recite it, and please repeat after me. Number one, is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Number two, is it fair to all concerned?
Is it fair to all concerned?
Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
And last but not least, will it be beneficial for all concerned?
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you. Now we go to greet our birthday Rotarians and aunts, and the wedding anniversaries. So for our birthdays, we want to greet Harley Liaño, Freddy Placino, Don Lino, Kiel Del Rio, Reggie Ponferrada, and past District Governor Sid Garcia. And for our Rotary aunts, Mimi C., Renalyn Nithian Nanthan, Lucy Enriquez, Twinkie Marcelo, Luli De Leon, Cristina Ordovesa, Connie Toledo, Terry Tambunting, Kathy Isea, and Maribeth Del Rio. Happy birthday to all of you. And for our wedding anniversaries, we want to greet past President Rick and Ed Librea, past President Ronnie and Marilyn, June and Charlson Campos, Julian and Julian Lim, and past President Eddie and Delia. Congratulations on your anniversaries. Okay. Now I would like to acknowledge our visiting dignitaries and district officers that we have the honor of attending today's meeting. Number one, I'd like to acknowledge Rotary International Vice-President Valarie Wafer, her spouse, Mark Wafer, our Honorable District Governor, Georgie Tan, her partner, immediate past President Conrad Banal, past District Governor Lee Yong-ho, District International Chair of 3620 in Korea. Past District Governor Edna Suter. Her handsome spouse, Martin Suter. CP Maricris Lim Pineda, District International Chair. Assistant Governor Banji Hain. Life-changing President Celine Santa Ana. Past President Richard Carino. And last but not least, Pinky Mission. Welcome, welcome. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. And Keys, better half, Rachel Harrison. I apologize. Okay, now I'd like to call on President Louis Asioche for President's time.
Thank you, Eddie. So not only is Rachel Harrison a better half of Keith, he is also my classmate. So good afternoon. I believe that protocols have been observed. Today is a very special meeting for a couple of reasons. First, this is our first ever blended type of regular weekly meeting after the pandemic. Just imagine, since July of last year, our meetings were done online. We might not be back to our usual hotel venue, which is at the Manila Pen, but having this in our very own building is already a welcome development as we inch our way towards the new normal. Seeing how encouraging the attendance was in our blended event during our 56th charter anniversary, we think that our members are ready to have on-site face-to-face meetings. I think by the time PE Mike's term would begin, we will already be totally face-to-face. Second, aside from our guest speaker, horologist Mr. Cunanan, who will talk about a very interesting topic, which is entitled Appreciating Time, we also have a very special guest, no less than Rotary International Vice-President Valarie Wafer, who has graced this meeting with her presence. I would also like to acknowledge our District Governor, Georgie Tan, for being here with us in this special occasion, and also PDG, past District Governor Lee Yong-ho of District 3620, Korea. We would like to thank the District International Committee, chaired by CP Maricris Lim Pineda, for giving us the honor of hosting RIVP Valarie in our regular club meeting. For our service project last week, I, together with Secretary Eddie Galvez and Chief of Staff Ron Botaro and Richard, flew out of Manila to visit and attend the graduation of some 300 families enrolled in our feedback program in La Libertad, Negros Oriental. What this feedback program is will be explained in the RC Makati video news, which I would now be sharing with you.
On April 21, President Louis Asioche and Secretary Eddie Galvez, along with COS Ron and Richard, flew to Dumaguete to attend the culminating ceremony of the ARC's feedback program in La Libertad, Negros Oriental. Soon after landing in Dumaguete, the group went straight to La Libertad after an almost 3-hour ride from the airport. They reached the town in time for a fiesta-like launch hosted by Barangay Captain Gani of South Poblacion, one of the 6 baroques or sitios of the feedback project in La Libertad. There to welcome the RCM team were Mayor Emmanuel Iway and the barangay captain of the participating barangays. After lunch and a quick rest at the Lalimar Resort, the team went back to South Poblacion, where the host took them for a boat ride to visit the mangrove areas. The day ended with dinner hosted by Mayor Iway at Lalimar Beach Resort. Day 2 started with breakfast by the beach hosted by Barangay Captain Glory of San Jose, where they were also met by members of RC Vice-City, a brother club of RC Makati. The team arrived to a fiesta-like atmosphere with banderitas, people garbed in colorful costumes trimmed with vegetables, a bamboo orchestra, and plenty of food prepared by the participating sitios. The venue was at the San Jose Covered Court, where some 300 project participants assembled with their vegetable harvest. The RCM team immediately helped with the weighing of the veggies, which were later on divided and distributed equally among the participating families. The event started with a program marked with short pep talks by the project managers and representative of ARC, our partners in the program, the barangay captain, and of course, Mayor M.E.Y. For his part, RC Makati President Louie Asioche expressed his gratitude to the community for their support and commitment to ensure the success of the program.
Kaya nga, La Libertad kasi it's liberty from hunger, liberty from poverty. Yan ang tawag sa inyong lugar dito at ang San Jose ay isa sa nagpapatunay kung bakit ang La Libertad ay tinatawag na La Libertad na.
The program ended with a cooking competition featuring recipes using the harvested veggies and festive vegetable dance numbers by the participating sitios, where President Louie and Secretary Eddie were invited to dance. Feedback is a project in partnership with Advancement for Rural Kids, consisting of a sustainable vegetable exchange program within selected neighborhoods in a given community. The project is funded by Rotary Club of Makati with a budget of 2.5 million to serve 2 communities in Bai, Laguna, in Luzon, and La Libertad, Negros Oriental in the Visayas. San Jose is one of the 5 barangays in La Libertad that the club has sponsored for the feedback program. The project needs households in a given community to plant vegetables in available places or vacant lots near their homes. They harvest the veggies and bring them on a scheduled time and date to a designated place where they exchange their harvests for other veggies brought by the parokmates. They give away 3 kinds of veggies per household and collect veggies from other participant families until they collect a pile of 20 kinds of veggies. Feedback is proving to be a community empowering and productive project that has been added this Rotary year to the expanding list of signature projects of the Rotary Club of Makati, designed to create an impact on the lives of the members of the needy communities.
I'd like to thank Secretary Eddie for not just joining me in this trip, but making sure that the Wave 5 phase in La Libertad will be a resounding success by constantly coordinating with our project partners in the ground before we went there. Eddie, I know you were still recovering from your operation, so I really deeply appreciate you joining me in Negros, pare. Special thanks as well to Director Philip Soliven for introducing us to this program and connecting us with ARC, which is an NGO based in New York City, and to Director Ferdy Ordovesa, who was the one who coordinated the Bai Laguna Wave 3 of the program. On membership last Tuesday, April 19, we conducted our prospective members orientation here in our clubhouse with 5 potential new members. I would like to thank Director Philip Sullivan for organizing this meeting and inviting most of our possible baby Rotarians in the future. I am encouraging our members to please invite your friends and colleagues to join us. We actually have 2 new recruits, and I hope they're attending with us online. Neil John Macasiar, who was referred to us by his mother-in-law, my classmate, LCP Cory Navarro of RC Makati EDSA, and newly minted lawyer, Attorney Stephen Javier, who was referred to us by his father, past President Steve Javier of RC Vegan, whom I had the pleasure to meet last month during our groundbreaking of a water project. Now, with these 2 additional recruits and the 5 who attended during last week's orientation, plus a potential recruit to be referred to us by past District Governor Edna Sutter, in the person of no less than the Ambassador of Switzerland, am I correct? We will have 8 recruits, in addition to the 5 baby Rotarians who have been inducted, or a total of 13. too shy of the target set by Governor Georgie to our club. Hopefully, I would be able to reach the target. So guys, let's make one final push for membership before the Rotary year ends in June. Just some reminders, this coming Friday and Saturday, our district will be holding the district conference, or DISCON for short. The first day, April 29, would be an online gathering, but the following day, April 30, would be an in-person event. Please note that the club has reserved for 24 seats, and we will still have slots for our members and their aunts who want to attend the in-person event on the 30th. Past District Governor Peps Bengzon and past President Reggie Nolito will have significant participations on day one. So please attend the day one online as well. Should you wish to attend in person on day two, kindly advise our secretariat now, ASAP. Lastly, please be advised that there will be no regular luncheon meeting on May 3 as it will be a holiday in observance of Eid al-Fitr, or the end of Ramadan. We won't also be having a meeting on May 10, which is the day after our national elections. Instead, the second week of May will be our service project week, and we will go to Zambales for an oral health mission in partnership with the Rotary Club of Makati Business District, where we will be giving free dentures to 50 residents in Barangay Omaya. Please join me and my classmate, life-changing President Rachel Harrison, on this mission. Our next meeting will be on May 17th with Mr. Dindo Manhit of Stratbase. He will give us a post-election analysis of the May 9 elections, including a discussion on the accuracy or inaccuracy of pre-election surveys. It will again be a blended event with some of us showing up in person here in our clubhouse and the rest participating online via Zoom. So thank you very much, Eddie.
Thank you, President Louie. Now I'd like to call Vice President Tony Lopez to introduce our distinguished speaker.
Thank you, Secretary Eddie. Sorry for the delay. I was enjoying that excellent mushroom soup. Okay. I met Carl Cunanan decades ago because he was the son of a dear golf mate, the late Admiral Cunanan. I always found him to be simple, informal, and very approachable. Thus, I address him today as simply Carl. Carl's university degree is in international business and finance from the American University in Washington, D.C. He has worked in the industries of shipping and logistics, import and export, production and distribution, and continues to act as consultants on these fields besides the areas he is known for, the luxury car and watch industries. Somehow, Carl's career started in auto racing before entering the business world. He has held racing licenses and competed in the UK and the Philippines. Editorially, he writes or has written about cars in the industry for Sea Magazine, Business World, Hong Kong South China Morning Post, and others. He is a columnist on motoring for the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Carl is also a judge for various international awards, including the World Car of the Year Awards presented in New York, in the New York Auto Show, the International Engine and Powertrain of the Year Awards given in Stuttgart every year, the Vehicle Dynamics International Awards given in UK, and the Professional Motorsports World Awards also in the UK. Finally, the Future Mobility of the Year Awards created by the Korean Advanced Institute for Science and Technology. I think it would be interesting to hear Carl share his views on the best car to purchase fitting each Rotary Club of Makati Rotarian member one day. Why not? He is editor-in-chief of C Magazine and has for years dwelt only on motor cars, comparing brands, models, and the features of the latest version of luxury cars that appear yearly. But today, we will listen to Carl speak about another facet of his life on the wristwatch side. Carl has been an enthusiast for decades, and his connections and friendships within the watch industry, whether local or international, predated the creation of Calibre magazine, which he founded and is also its editor-in-chief. Carl's articles on watches has been published around the region, and he is an Academy member and juror of the Grand Prix de Horologie de Genève, which every year awards the best of the watchmaking world in Geneva and Switzerland. Some months back, Finex, Financial Executives Institute, for which many Makati Rotarians are also members, had Carl as a guest speaker. And I was truly surprised because Carl's talk had nothing to do with finance, accounting, or economic trends. I truly found this presentation so interesting, opening a new world and dimension to this device that I've had on my wrist almost all my life. For decades, it has either been a Baume & Mercier or an IWC. But for the last 2 years, my wife gifted me with a Samsung Galaxy Frontier watch, which I'm currently wearing. I need Carl to help me convince my wife, Melanie, that I should switch back to my Swiss watches without offending her. There is a way. Thank you, Carl. So today, many wear watches that serve many purposes. It may be a timepiece, merely a timepiece. It may be a collectible. For some, it may be an investment. For a few, it may be a statement of stature. Or it could be a pamana, a handed down piece for generations, as Patek Philippe advertises. So fellow Rotarians and guests, I am pleased to present Carl Cunanan.
That was flattering. Okay. I love watches. I don't know where this started. It may well have started because I took my father's watch apart and couldn't put it back together again. Okay. Okay, there we go. I'm clearly not as smooth as a watch is. There, okay. Okay, I'll try it again. So like I said, I love watches. I don't know where that started. My father was, his training in Annapolis was engineering. So we always had this shop in the back of the house that we'd be working on things. I took apart his watches. I took apart his clocks. I could not put them back together. I'm still alive, so that's a good thing. But I've always liked them. And I like them because they touch many different worlds. Okay, if you look at what used to be our traditional morning ritual, which is this, you hear this clicking, okay, And what this clicking is there's a tooth. There's a tooth that stops another tooth gear from moving back and forth. And within that gear is a tiny, tiny spring the size of a hair, and it's called a hairspring. And that just provides the power for a movement that basically is what allowed us to do things like split the atom, properly dissect the second, properly measure time, measure speed, measure chemicals, split the atom, go to the space, and so on. There's an amazing technical background behind all of this. And you got to remember that this was all before there was light. Okay, this is all before there were electrical tools. None of this happened the way it's done now. This happened when a guy on a mountaintop in Switzerland couldn't farm, so he would create a gear, and then another guy would create another part, and they would all get together and go to a barn and sell that to someone who would in turn make a watch. So there's an amazing history. There's an amazing history to how this works, and it continues to today. And one of the most interesting things, and I will tell you about this later, is that this is being taken up by people that are much younger than you expect. I had a meeting, I had the most amazing 24 hours. I was telling Vita, I had the most amazing 24 hours because I met yesterday with 2 kids from Xavier who just got out of college and are making their own watch. And there are at least 5 different small companies in the Philippines making their own watch. And these are all kids who are starting them. 2 of them were projects from school. So it's just this amazing thing. And we don't see, we look at it as something that's older. We look at it as something that we've been for all of our lives. And there's an entire generation where people weren't wearing watches, but all the younger kids are now getting back into that. And that's an amazing thing. Okay. The other thing I like about watches is that they kind of bring people together. And they do this in a very different way. The watch industry on its own is a very, very passionate, it's kind of like publishing, actually. You get very passionate about what you do. Okay, you enjoy it, and it's a drive, and it touches all these other different worlds. And that's really what I enjoy about it. What I'm here to do today, though, is I'm going to try and give you a quick brief on what it is I think you need to know when you go in and explain, try to convince someone that you need another watch. By the way, I normally wear 2 watches. I don't now. One is an Apple Watch. Okay, so that's on your right wrist, and on your left wrist is whatever you want to wear. Key point though, buy her a watch first. Then you do that. Buy her a watch first. There you go. Okay, so I think you have my presentation. So we will start that now. This is going to be a basic, quick introduction, and this will allow you to ask me questions later. Okay, so basically this is us. That's what we've been producing for 15 years. This is a fully Filipino, okay, let's go on. Caliber and C are fully Filipino magazines. Okay, nothing like them existed before, and I'd like to say that we've made headways in the industry, and we've won awards in the industry, and it's completely Filipino. Everyone thinks it's foreign, it's not. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the car one. We do a lot of fun stuff, and we can talk about that if you want as well, although that's a whole nother conversation. I don't do just luxury cars. We also do any car that you want to talk about. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to get into what is basically Watches 101 that many of you may know, but I would like to define a little bit more. The parts of a watch are the inside, the outside, and so on. Next slide, please. Inside the watch is what I fell in love with, the mechanical parts, okay? These are amazing pieces of intricate engineering. And please remember that this was all done before there was any kind of power that supplied them. IWC, as an example, you were saying, IWC was started by an American who flew, he was an entrepreneur and he flew to Switzerland, no, he took a boat, sorry, to Switzerland to create power from rivers. That's what he was doing, and he just needed watchmaking as a secondary thing. Okay. Next slide, please. You also have the quartz watches. Quartz in general refers to the timing system. Rather than having a physical clicking timing system like a metronome, you have a wafer that in turn, when you feed it energy, puts out a pulse at a certain time, and that's far, far, far more accurate. The watch, any smart watch on your wrist will be more accurate than any mechanical watch you have. That's not why we love them. Next slide, please. Then we have things that are interesting. These are hybrids. And what these are they take advantage of the electronics of the quartz watches, but they're powered by the rotor, which moves when you move your hand. So those are combinations that are very, very interesting. The people at the top of this, although they did not start it, are Seiko and Grand Seiko. We can get into that later, but this is basically what you're looking at when you're going into a watch shop. Next slide, please. What's on the outside of the watch is basically the case. When we grew up, cases were steel or gold or silver or whatever. Nowadays, you have, on the right, for example, you have resins and plastics. Just because it is a resin or a plastic does not mean it is not premium. There's some extremely expensive watches made out of resins and sapphire crystal and so on. Steel is my personal choice because you're paying for the movement and you're not paying for the case. Having said that, a gold watch looks nice. Next slide, please. What we call glass on the front of the watch is not actually glass. It is usually either sapphire, crystal, or acrylic. Acrylic is the older material. It is used, they both have advantages. They are used in the older watches because that's what they were built with, but they have a warmth to them. They can be scratched. They're more prone to scratching, but they are stronger. They use these acrylics in things like deep dive technical watches because a sapphire crystal might shatter, but it won't scratch, whereas an acrylic crystal might scratch, but it won't shatter. Okay, next page, please. The bezel is what's around the glass of the watch, basically. They can be movable. I have some examples I will show you. They can be movable. They can be immovable. Their main function is primarily to keep the glass in on the watch, but after that, they become decorative. Next slide, please. On the left, you have a fixed bezel, which does nothing but keep the glass on. On the right, you have a moving bezel. Both of these are from Seikos and Grand Seikos. The point of having a movable bezel, a lot of that came about because of diving, because you needed to keep in mind exactly how long you were underwater and how much air you had left in your tank. That's one thing to remember is that watches, as much as we think of them as fashion statements now, they all serve the purpose. They were all a tool. And there's a really interesting reason why watches went to Switzerland, which I'll explain later. It's all about religion. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that watches were considered tools and not artwork. Next slide, please. Okay, the bracelets and straps. This basically is what keeps it on your wrist. This is important because you may like one or the other, but they might not fit you very well. The simplest one is the strap. It's the one on the right. It's flexible, it's easy. The one on the left is a bracelet. It's more secure in general. Then you have something, again, called a hybrid in the middle, which is called, hold on, next slide, please. Okay, this is just how they make up. Bracelets, by the way, are extremely intricate. You don't realize how hard it is to make something soft and flexible on your wrist and stay there safely. Next slide, please. Okay, those are just some examples of straps. Next slide, please. This is what you call a deployant strap. The advantages are that it has both the softness of a leather strap and the strength or the security of a bracelet. This is an example. What I have in my hand right now. The positives are it's very, very secure. It's not going to fall off your wrist. The negatives are this is one thing you actually should remember. You got to fit this onto your hand in the shop because you might just not like it. Okay, and there is a thing. The more fine a watch is, the more it will likely be just a leather strap, because this just makes it a bit more thick. And I have examples for you that later. Next slide, please. Okay, the case back. If you're as old as I am, you just remember plain case backs like the one on the left that would maybe be engraved with your dad's name or your name or so on. On the right, you have, these are what they would call specially engraved case backs for a limited edition. The one in the middle is something that would allow you to, it's an IWC again, and it's something that would allow you to engrave your name or your son's name or your wife's name on it as well. There's no technical reason for these. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a bit more interesting. On the left, you have your basic plain solid case back. On the right, you have a clear case back, which is what allows you to see inside the movement, which is why a lot of people get watches. Anyway, in the middle is an officer's case back, which is a very classic design from when you didn't have glass and you needed to access the watch movement to fix it, but at the same, or to adjust it, but at the same time you want to protect it. That's what the officer's case back does. Next slide, please. Okay, there's some other things you should know about watches, and this is what's going to happen when you walk into a shop. Next slide, please. First of all, there are complications. And what are complications? Complications are basically anything past an hour, a minute, and a second hand. Anything past that is a complication. It's an addition, usually, to the regular movement. And when I say addition, that means that it's a module they put on top of it, or sometimes they build it into it. Next slide, please. This is their basic time telling. You can have a 2-hand or a 3-hand watch. The one on the left is a Mickey Mouse watch. The one on the right is a Patek Calatrava. Next slide, please. Then you have calendars. Calendars are anything past the hour, the minute, and the second. Next slide, please. On the left, these are some classics. On the left, you have a basic date. What happens is that the second hand turns the hour hand, the minute hand turns the hour hand turns the date. Then in the middle, you will have a date. And then on the right, you have, in this case, it's a perpetual calendar. A calendar watch will just give you the date, the day, and maybe the month. But you need to change that every end of the month, because you need for a month it's 30 or 31 days, or for February if it's a leap year. An annual calendar will handle that without any input from you up until February. Then you've got to change it there. A perpetual calendar will, as long as you keep it wound, keep on running accurately by the time your great-grandkid gets it. By the way, when you talk about things like watch winders, they're important for things like perpetual calendars because they're extremely hard to reset. And half the time people just bring them to the shop to have them reset it, which is fine because you paid a lot of money for it. Next slide, please. Okay, then you have chronographs. Chronographs are basically just stopwatches. And these alone are insanely important for history because they did things. I mean, this is before we had all the medical technology we have now. They would use these to time how much medicine went into your vein, or how long you exposed someone to radiation. Almost all the modern sciences now had to develop after everything became consistent with time. Next slide, please. These are just some examples of chronographs, and they're all different kinds. On the left is a basically traditional Heuer chronograph. On the right is what you would call a split-second rattrapante or Vacheron-Constantin. And what that does is it splits the second twice, so you can time two things. In the middle is a very interesting one. It's a very, very classic complication. It's called a flyback. And the flyback came about because if you were a pilot at that time, you had to make course adjustments based on your schedule. And you did this. Understand, we're not talking about airline pilots 30,000 feet in the air. We're talking about guys in a biplane or a Sopwith Camel flying above treetop and dropping bombs on people. So he would have to go in this direction for 1 hour, 2 minutes, 30 seconds, and then he would have to suddenly switch. So this movement allowed him to do all that with one push button rather than two. And remember, there is no light in that plane. It might be raining. There might be people shooting at you. Everything had to be simple. This is a great example of how things had to be tools, and they were created as tools. Next paragraph. Next slide, please. The moon phase is just pretty. It came again because people at one point in our lives, the human race needed to know when tide was up, tide was down. It was important for sailors. It was important for arguably people doing wine. So it's just, but nowadays it's really just a very pretty complication. Next slide, please. The minute repeater. Okay, this is what many people, myself included, consider the penultimate or ultimate watch complication. And this all comes again from the fact that there was no electricity when these things were built. How do you tell what time it is when you can't see your watch? And the answer was they took the system they use in Big Ben and they put it on your wrist. So when you would call it up, you would hear a soft gonging that would tell you the hour, the quarter hour, and then the minutes past the quarter hour. If you ever want to buy one of these things, you have to be very nice to someone like Mr. Stern of Patek Philippe and write him a letter, and then he'll think about it. But we mentioned Patek Philippe a while ago. They are very, very focused on generations past ours. They do not think in terms of the way other people think. They shepherd an industry, not just their own company. And one of the nicest things I ever heard from him was, how come I would talk to Mr. Stern and I said, why are you not wearing your minute repeater or your annual calendar or perpetual calendar? And he said, because if I do, that means someone else doesn't have theirs yet, and we cannot have that. Next slide, please. A tourbillon is something that's very, very popular, but of not real use in today's world. It's very, very nice. It's wonderful to look at. But the tourbillon was an answer to a pocket watch. And the pocket watch, if you remember, would only be in two positions. It would be flat in your pocket or flat on your desk or your table at night. And because of that, you would have this issue where you don't have lubrication, you don't have movement, and that degrades anything mechanical. So the tourbillon is an answer to that. Do you need it in today's world? No, if it's on your wrist, because you're always moving around anyway, but it is a very pretty movement. Next slide, please. Here's another one you should understand. In-house manufacturing is a word, is a phrase that is now used by a lot of people. It's supposed to mean that they can build the entire watch themselves in their facility. That's a very, very murky definition. Okay, you can hear it a lot because it's great for marketing. It was not historically the way watches were made. Next slide, please. Okay, in-house manufacturing is when they say they can produce everything. That does not mean they are producing everything. It means they have the ability to produce everything. So you may well buy a watch from an in-house manufacturer that uses different parts from other places. Okay, so they turn around and say, okay, this is our in-house manufacture movement. Next slide, please. But what that means is a little, it's not historic. Remember when I said that parts of watches were made by this one guy in the Swiss Alps working on this part, another guy working on another part? That's how they were made, because the skill sets for all of these things were never the same thing. The guy, just as a car, the guy who makes your leather seat is not the guy who you want building your engine. It's the same thing. So understand that this sounds great, but there are ups and downs to it. The ups are largely for the manufacturers because they get to sell you something more expensive. The downs are for you. If they're the only people that make that movement and you have a problem with it, it can take you a very long time and several flights to get your watch repaired. The opposite of that is using something, and a lot of people are using it. I have an example of that here. A lot of people are using very, very simple movements from the Swiss or the Japanese or even the Chinese, and anyone can replace them. The guy in Makati Cinema Square can replace them. The guy in Glorieta can replace them or fix them. So it really comes down to what you're looking for. Next slide, please. Okay, we go back to maintenance and repair. As we said, the simpler they are, the better. Do not go play golf with your annual calendar, special calendar. It's really not a good idea. It probably could, but you just don't want to take the risk. Okay. Having said that, there are some things. If you see, let's say Richard Mille makes a watch for, I think it's for Nadal, and he uses it at tennis. And we've literally thrown that thing across the room to test it, and it does work. You don't want to do that. It wasn't our watch. It was their watch. Next slide, please. Servicing, you have several options. The primary option is always to go to the authorized service center, Rolex. I was just at Rolex this morning picking up a watch I'm going to show you guys later. But the strength of Rolex, let's understand Rolex. Rolex answered the need a while back, which was for a reliable, consistent watch that produced a good product. That's what they did. And to do that, they put their service centers all around the world. So it was that important back then. Nowadays, we take for granted the fact that our watches work, but that really wasn't the case the way it was before, or the fact that they're not going to break if we go wash our hands with them. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're just getting into how you use your watch on a regular day. Traveling with watches, should you or not? We've always thought that, yeah, bring your watch wherever you go. Bring your baby along. It's a fun conversation and so on. The honest negatives nowadays are that watches have gotten so popular and gotten so much attention that it is dangerous for you to bring your watch in places. And it's not, I have zero issue with wearing a nice watch in the Philippines, but I know that people have had their watches stolen off their wrist in front of Harrods. I know people who've had their watches taken out of their bags in the Geneva airport. So it's no joke. People know these watches. If they see them on you, they may well tag you and follow you. That's just the way it is. So where there's another watch I have here that kind of fits that. Next slide, please. When you're driving around, when you're moving around with your watch, one thing that you got to remember is to keep it secure, whether it's at home or whether it's traveling. Understand you're going through things like airport security. Have a little case so that your watch is safe when you take it off and put it back on, because it's very, very easy to forget that you left your watch somewhere, especially if you travel with more than one watch. Next slide, please. This is the same proper storage. One thing to remember is that the cases of watches, the boxes are extremely valuable. That was never the case. When you would get a Patek or you would get effectively your cardboard box. Now, when you get anything, it's a big box with all the paperwork and so on, and all of that is valuable. If you're a collector, you will ask, is the watch triple box? Meaning, does it have the first box? Does it have the second box? Does it have the box it's shipped in? Okay, all of those things. Remember that. You might want to keep your watches in a safe or a box or a desk or whatever, but the boxes themselves have value. Just remember that. Next slide, please. The watch winders and safes. Watch winders are important because, again, primarily because of lubrication and setting of perpetual calendars. A lot of people buy some really expensive watches and they like to keep them safe. I know some people who will regularly rotate watches out of a safe. I know other people who just keep them on their desk drawer. It really comes down to how you feel about it. Next slide, please. Okay, buying watches. The watch industry is very, very wild right now. I've seen some really crazy prices. You got to figure out where you're going to buy your watch. And quite often nowadays, people are buying watches from the secondary market. That's an art on its own. Just understand that you're buying the seller before you're buying the piece. I can give you any number of suggestions on what to buy, but it really comes down to where you can get them and who you trust. Next slide, please. Okay, the same thing. Nowadays, people are buying online from the big stores. That's completely workable. If you want to buy a Rolex from Rolex, you can, but they don't have a lot of them right now. Next slide, please. Well, I'll give you a tip, by the way. Something's coming in 2 weeks, if anyone wants that. Watches as gift. This is the one story. I'm really, really bad at buying gifts for my wife. And I would ask my Swiss friends, what do you do to buy the right watch for your wife? And he goes, don't think of it as a piece. Think of it as a journey. In other words, bring her in on it. Bring your son, your daughter, your wife, your husband, whatever. Bring them in on the conversation. Make them part of it. When we would go to the watch shows in Switzerland, they would be families that would walk through. And they were all included in the discussion. And the end result is, you're not getting, oh, honey, here's your watch. Big smile, whatever, or not big smile sometimes. But when you all go together, then it becomes a journey. You know, you can travel with watches. You can go to museums. It's an excuse if you want to go to watch museums, get your wife into watches, all these things. And then it becomes, it's not about the piece, it's about the time you spend with them. And that's where we kind of want to get back to all this. A lot of people think I'm talking about products. I'm not. I'm talking about a level of interest and passion that comes from people that really, really love their stuff, whether it's watches, cars, fine wines, clothing, anything, whether it's technology, whether it's learning how to speak, whatever, whether it's public service. Time is what you make it. Okay, the watch is what you make it. It's merely a construct of man. I would tell you to, honestly, I was thinking about this. I don't know how much sense this makes, but I would do the 4-weight test on the watches. I would say that exactly. Is, you know, but not on the watch, but on your time. Is it beneficial? Are you giving your time? Are you fair with where you give your time? Are you being fair to other people? At the end of it all, is it the truth? Have you spent your time today in the best possible way? The watch they're wonderful things, but they're not the only thing. Okay, so I'd like to thank everyone for their time. This is a tremendously geeky subject and I can go really, really deep into it, but I would much rather answer any questions you have. I usually have a lot of questions. Feel free to ask. Thank you very, very much for all of your time. What do we do now? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. I would like to now open the floor Any questions?
I have a question, Eddie.
Go ahead, President Louis.
Carl, I'm sure you have been asked this question so many times, but let's say a genie pops up. A genie pops up and gives you a choice, only one choice. Carl, only one choice for a watch among a million watches. What watch and what model will you choose?
Okay, the one watch question. I would use the watch that he knows my dad wore before, which is an old Rolex Zephyr. But in terms of a modern watch, it really comes down to what you want. If you want something solid and simple, something like this, it's a Rolex GMT. They're around forever. They're completely solid. If it kind of depends on what you want to say. Okay, I made a choice when my son was born. I bought a watch for his year, and I was like, it shouldn't be a luxury watch because that's not why I like watches. It should be a simple everyday thing, and the end result was an Omega Speedmaster, because this is prior to all the hype of Omega. It had a Snoopy on it, which is fun, but it really comes down to that. It comes down to what you think. The positives in general, people look at Rolexes because they're valuable. Rolex is nowhere near at the top. Okay, it's nowhere near at the top of fine watchmaking. What it is, though, is a consistent product that can be sold anywhere in the world, honestly. So that's a very, very positive draw. It's also a completely good product. It's not. It was never meant to be a mayabang product. It was never meant to be. Well, it's not that it was never meant to be a status symbol, but it was meant to be a tool. It was meant to be a watch that you could wear consistently without any problem. So that's what I would say. If you want one that, personally, if I could get any watch, I would get a Patek minute repeater, which I will never will. So.
Secretary Eddie, I have a question. You know, Carl, I'm forced to look at that good-looking gentlemen in front of me. 2 out of the 5 are wearing Rolexes. Okay. Yet you mentioned earlier, you may look for a Rolex if you can get one. Could you expound on that? Is there a shortage now of Rolex?
Okay, yeah, there's more demand than there is supply. I don't want to say shortage because it's not in any way engineered. Over the last 4 or 5 years, and this is largely because of the internet, people suddenly, if you Google what's the best watch, you're going to get the same answer. You're going to get Rolex Daytona, you're going to get Patek Nautilus, and so on. So it's kind of grasping at the lowest hanging fruit. There's no intelligence involved. You're just doing what everybody tells you. And if you Google something, it will give you the answer that the most people will say. So by nature, what you're doing is going where everybody else does. I have a really good example here. Getting back to the Rolex part of it. Yes, they're hard to get. If you walk across the street now to Rolex, you're not gonna get anything you want. 5 years ago, you could walk in there and you'd get it the next day. Okay, they're not tightening their supply as far as I believe, honestly. I will explain this. Rolex is a foundation. Okay, it was Hans Wilsdorf started it as a foundation when it was set up as that. So from the financial point of view, we have no idea what their marching orders are. The reason they don't make changes is may well be they cannot make any changes. Okay, so they can't expand production. They can't do any of that. They're having problems right now because people are buying this watch and turning around and selling it for twice as much. That's not good for Rolex. They're not making the money. Someone else is making the money. It causes problems with their distribution. It causes all these other issues. So yes, there's a shortage. They're trying to address it. I know they're trying to address it. In all honesty, when I tell people just sign up and wait, you end up getting it. But it's a lot of hype. I've seen things where they say it's impossible. It's really, really not. Here's another example. This I assume everybody's heard of. This I assume nobody's heard of. Okay, this is the exact opposite of what most people would like. It is a small watch company out of Japan. There are 200 pieces produced. If this is a $10,000 watch, this is a $3,000 watch. If this has their own movement, this has a movement made by Miyota, a citizen. So it's a very, very basic movement. It's not. It's called Chrono Tokyo, which is the second. It's the second brand of Hajime Asaoka, a Japanese watchmaker. What's the same about these things? They're both valued on the secondary market at twice their SRP. Okay, so these are there. The only thing that would stop you from getting this watch is internet speed. If you got on there and keyed it in and gave your credit card, you would get the watch. Okay, no question. So there's a lot more out there than just Rolex. I think what's happening now to Rolex and Nautilus, Patek, and so on is not great for the industry, and I think they're trying to solve that. I was talking about how Patek looks at themselves. I was talking with Dax Lucas, the writer for business for the Inquirer, and he was trying to understand why Patek Philippe stopped making their basic Nautilus watch. And I said, because they don't want to be the Nautilus company. I'm like, why not? They'll make money. Like, that's really not where they want to go. The Nautilus is so far down the ability of Patek Philippe. They can make so much better stuff. It far, far better than that simple watch. They don't want to be known for that. And that's why they made that stand. Like, we're just going to stop doing it. It's really not. It's a great watch, no question. It's groundbreaking. It's wonderful. It was groundbreaking in its time, but it is not representative of things like the minute repeaters and things like that. It's just a completely different market. That's the other thing to understand. Even within one brand, you can have different people buying different watches. Okay, you can have people starting in the Calatrava. You're gonna have people who will get the Nautiluses, and you're gonna have people who will buy something you've never heard of, and you may never see. And they're all different, and that's all within one small company. Okay, so I hope that answered your question. Basically, the answer is just wait for Rolex, or buy it on the secondary market. Or if you bought it 4 years ago, you're very, very happy now.
Chito Cantada has a question.
Carl, I have this problem. While I was looking over my dad's possessions, he had several Omega watches, about 4 or 5 of them. One was a quartz, the first quartz of Omega. I brought it to the service center. They said they have no more parts. So I asked, well, what am I going to do with it? They couldn't give me an answer. So I brought some mechanical Omega. Then they said, you have to send it to Switzerland. So what I did, I sent it to my daughter, who was in Washington, D.C., and they sent it to Switzerland. It took them 4 months before they could fix it. So that's fixed now. But I still have one. It's a gold Omega. I brought it here to the service center. They said they have no more parts. So what do you want me to do with it? It's gold. Now I'm asking you, what am I going to do with it? I can't just throw it away. It's just, how can I throw it away? It's sentimental. Throw it away? Okay, please. I don't know what to do with it.
Give it to me.
Okay, we were talking about service a while ago, and in that case, you have the authorized service center. And understand that the authorized service center is like Mercedes-Benz, right? Okay, what their job to do is to sell cars, and then they fix the cars of the most recent years. They are not able to handle watches from that far ago. If you go to Rolex, they'll do the same thing. They only have X number of parts, and they cannot fulfill every need. And plus, honestly, people didn't expect watches to be around this long. You know, they were never meant to be collectible pieces. They were meant to be tools, right? And then you change it when you have a better tool. Having said that, it's exactly modern technology that's allowing people to make these changes. Nowadays, you can, if there's enough demand, they can produce a part for you from 3D printing. Okay, and for a watch like that, or any of these older watches, that's kind of where you should be going. If you don't, if you want to just want the watch to run, you can bring it to some of the different people in the Philippines, or you can bring it to a qualified specialist abroad, get a good assessment. It's always good to go to the first authorized service center, because then you'll get an assessment. If Rolex accepts it, it means that it's legitimate. Okay, so that alone is one big deal. And then you have to realize, how far do you want to go, and where do you want to go with it, and understand that this Rolex versus that Rolex, or this Omega versus that Omega, may not have the same value. So you may want to just make it a running piece. I know a lot of people who said, no, I just want to wear the watch. You know, I understand it's not going to be hugely valuable, so just run with it. So in that case, you need to explore. There are people in Makati Cinema Square, there's Mangloy in Marikina. There are people who look into these, and then you can go from there. And then honestly, go online and go onto the forums, because I will bet you other people have already solved this problem. But there is definitely a way to do it. What I wanted to tell you about was these two Savior kids, and they designed and built their own watch using Chinese movements. And that's completely possible now. A friend of mine and I made a watch for fun. We ended up selling 100 pieces. It was extremely, we had to learn a lot, but all of that is possible now. And it's not because of the big companies, it's because of craftsmen. You know, there's a whole wave of young people who are looking for something tactile. More young people are wearing watches, more young people are using fountain pens, more young people are getting into stationery. They want something physical. Okay, and there's a whole wave of people who are no longer going the corporate route. I know so many people. There's a guy I'm talking to now. He lives in Oman. He's a doctor. He stopped doing that, and he's just making dials out of gold. And he's making really, really good dials out of gold. And we're going to commission him to make something. You have all these options. And what was possible 5 years ago is completely possible now. And you can communicate anywhere in the world to find the parts you need. So don't think of it that way. Just decide how far you want to go, and then run with it.
Thank you.
Peter.
Hello, Carl. You know, in the movie, The Internship, you know, and that movie, The Internship, the two would-be interns of Google were forced to stop selling watches because apparently people would simply look at their mobile phones to tell what time it is, right? So even now, if you ask what time is it, you just look at your phone and it tells you what time it is. So my question is, would you say that the switch watches have lost their purpose but have become a mere piece of jewelry or status quo symbol?
Okay, there's a guy named Steven Schwartz who sells high-end watches to Silicon Valley, and he's making a huge amount of money. So there's still value to them. Any more than if you buy a Ferrari, are you buying a car? No, you're not. If you're buying, it's not about that. If you want to go back to college and the Maslow hierarchy of needs, you know, we're not answering this need anymore. We're not answering, I need to know what time it is. We're answering something else. And on one hand, it could be a status symbol, but on the other hand, it's just, I mean, it's something you like. It's something, you have this beating piece of machinery in your hand, that on your wrist, and it's just this wonderful journey. There's any number of things. One of the things that really surprises me is that so many young people are buying watches, and they're buying them, and they're buying multiples of them. They buy them to fit their look. They buy them to fit what they're wearing that day. That's a good thing because it's getting people to look at watches more. And then from there, they're only going to go up. I was once asked why in our magazine we talked about watches like G-Shocks. And I said, because the next step up is going to be Seiko, and the next step up is going to be this. And that's one thing we always said, is that we never want to be exclusive. By nature, we look exclusive. In reality, we are extremely inclusive. We are more likely to get a really fun story about someone who has an inexpensive watch and knows the story. I was in a meeting the other day, and I was pulling people's watches off their wrists, and every one of them was this great story. Oh, I had a hard time in life. I sold all my watches. This is my new one. Then the best watch in that group was a Patek Philippe limited perpetual calendar. one of the grand complications. And I said, "Oh, what's the story?" It's like, "Oh, I bought it last year. That's it. There's no other story, you know." So it's not about telling time anymore. Having said that, one quick question about fixing your watch. A lot of people consider the quartz watches as throwaways, and in all honesty, even mechanical watches were considered throwaways. They would take your movement and replace it with a new movement because it's easier than having it repaired. This is the Philippines, you repair everything. So we can repair anything. But there is a whole generation of craftsmen now that will take old quartz watches and rewire them so they work. Okay, and the same thing happens in cars. I have a 1997 Mazda Miata, which is messing up because it's got a computer box. So people have learned to rewire the computer box to fix that. So all these things will happen if there's a financial force behind it. And the financial force is not gonna come from the big companies because they want to sell you the watch. It's gonna come from craftsmen. It's gonna come from clubs. It's gonna come from people who are interested in them. There. So it's more than just a fashion piece.
I have a question. Again, if, for example, Martin Suter, who's there in the left, would like to buy his very successful wife, past district governor Edna Suter, a nice gift. Nothing with diamonds, just a nice watch. What brand? What model?
I'd ask your wife. Seriously, because I'm really, really bad at that. So I ask my wife and she chooses. And then,
Would she know what watch?
oh yeah, she does. So unfortunately, having said that, just to go on the whole diamond thing, the ability to put diamonds on watches is extremely intricate. It's a science on its own. And so don't discount that. And that doesn't mean it has to be diamond studded, but just little things there. I mean, they just make them special. So, okay, quick answer. If you get something super, super nice like a Patek, what are you gonna do next year? You know, I mean, that's the problem, right? So you know, it's not just about the brand. It's about, there are any number of little pieces that will speak to your heart, and they're not necessarily who you think they are. You know, there's any number of them. So.
Actually, Tony, right? Let me give you a quick flashback. I mentioned that to Mike. A few years ago, my wife bought me a watch, which is eluding me now for the last 6 years. It's haunting me because I went to Palawan, bought an island in Palawan, and I wear very seldom my Panerai Ferrari California flyback chronograph. And 300 pieces were produced. To make the story short, I came back, I jumped into the pool, I left my watch on a black granite in my house, and eventually after a few days I said, where's my watch? Because I was just thinking I'm in my own house, and I did not anymore check about my watch until I wanted to go and put it back in the safe. Now, my wife thought first, okay, your watch is, maybe you forgot it in the hotel or in the checkpoint through immigration. And luckily, I was able to go through PMP to find out that the video or the CCTV was clearly showing that during the time when I check in Busuanga Airport, I was wearing my watch and I went through the checkpoint. So there's no issue that somebody took my watch. But going back to it, since it haunts me, my wife has bought me 2 watches and I lost 2 watches. And I want to make Bawi in Tagalog. I want to make Bawi. And I tried to, I finally went to Zurich to blacklist my watch. I have all papers, the boxes, everything I have all complete. I blacklisted the watch worldwide, and
nobody ever came after 6 years to say, we found your watch. How can I, number one, how can I look for that watch? Because I commission people in Panerai to add $10,000 during that time. If you can find me that watch, so I can replace it for the love of my wife. And I cannot find it. That's when I checked. So it's really something, it's really haunting me because I know it's somewhere in the Philippines. Maybe it ended up finally abroad. I don't know if the watch is somewhere in a private collection now. I always hope somebody goes to the Panerai for servicing. They said they will confiscate the watch, but I'm not so sure if finally I go to Italy or somewhere that they really will confiscate the watch. They might just say, I'm sorry, we are not servicing the watch.
Thank you. Well, that is an issue, and it's an issue on different levels. In general, if they find out that it's a stolen watch and it's been reported, like you said, they will try to address that. However, it is completely possible that the person who owns the watch had nothing to do with it and bought it in good faith. So you have both ends that they, as an organization, have to take care of, and they won't notice anything about the watch until it shows up to them. Other things to do are go to online communities and tell people that, okay, this was stolen if anyone happens to see it. Quite often you'll see that work better because there's really no point to bring your watch in for service unless you need to. So it's clubs. I was once called by a sheriff in California because they were trying to find someone who had stolen watches out of the Philippines and ended up in California. So it's a global market, especially now. So nice watch though. Not in the slightest. I wouldn't know where to go. They would say the same thing. I would start buying your wife more watches for one thing. But no, that's hard to do. It's a global market. So.
Last question, Mr. Moderator. Yes, Conrad Banal.
How is the price determined? Is that more or less market driven? Is there an exchange? In the secondary market, how do you determine the price? Is individual to individual? Okay.
Okay, that's a wild one because prices are really, really wild right now. If, for example, if I want to sell a watch, for example, I would go online to a couple places and see what the global market was, and then I would compare that to what the local market says. In terms of the gray market that's now pricing Rolexes and Pateks beyond belief, that's a lot of hype, and understand that there are people in the world now who will just pay whatever they want to get whatever they want immediately. That's why the prices are going up. They should stabilize, but I can't say when. So if you're looking to find a fair value for a particular watch, the best answer right now is to go online to a couple of different sites, legitimate sites like Chrono24, Watch Charts, and Watchfinder, and so on. And then you'll get an idea. So at least you know you're not being gypped really badly.
Okay, last question. Carl, I'd like to ask what you think about Grand Seiko watches. Not just Seiko, Grand Seiko. They say reasonably priced, excellent craftsmanship, and a watch to have. Reasonably priced. Could I get your opinion? Grand Seiko.
Okay, I actually love Grand Seiko. I'm fairly close to them. They bring a level of attention to detail that will surpass many of the Swiss watchmakers. Okay, they have a level of service that in general globally is very good. They don't have the following of a lot of Swiss watches, but I think in terms of what you're getting, they're excellent. They have their own aesthetic. There's another thing, which is when we were talking about being completely in-house, Seiko has always been in-house because they started from absolutely nowhere. So they created everything they needed to produce these watches. They're wonderful watches. They just opened a new boutique here, but a lot of collectors have moved from Rolex, Panerai, Patek, and so on to Grand Seikos because they're just very interesting. And they have some watches that I would put on par with the Calatrava in terms of how clean they are, in terms of the level of detail. There's a level of finishing. They're excellent. So I would have zero issue with recommending them.
Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you very much, Carl, for a very interesting topic. Thank you. Let's give him a big hand. Now I'd like to call President Louis for his response.
Well, thank you, Carl. That was a very interesting talk and it was time efficient. I had a very interesting talk with PDG Lee. And do you know that PDG Lee has a collection of 100 watches? 100 watches. And just to give you an idea of how extensive his collection is, the pictures of the watches that Carl have shown, he has them all. He has them all. And also, Martin, I asked, no, don't worry, your Panerai didn't land in his collection. So, actually, Carl, my first timepiece, or wristwatch more specifically, was a Lyric watch. It's an inexpensive watch. And it was a gift from my dad when I graduated at the top of my class during kindergarten. It was junior size for sure, because I was just 6 or 7. But when I was in first grade, I broke that watch, my very first watch. And do you know how I broke it? I was keeping myself busy, turning on the dial while kneeling in front of a classroom wall, along with my seatmate. And why? Because we were being punished for hiding the eraser of my classmate. And it broke my heart that I broke that watch. And that was how naughty I was, but it was a prized possession because it was given to me by my dad. So I say this with a tinge of wistful nostalgia because the giver, my dad, has long passed on, but also because it serves one purpose of why timepieces or watches are there. Not only they give time, but they are good gifts to give. And in my case, that watch was not a family heirloom, expensive type of watch that gets handed down to generations. I know it was an inexpensive watch. It's a Lyric watch, more known for Lyric pianos, I guess. No? But then for the recipient, it is a priceless watch. Of course, I was just 6 or 7 and I haven't seen a Patek Calatrava yet. Nowadays, watches or timepieces have evolved from form to function. I have not been wearing my modest collection of dress watches, opting to wear my Apple Watch as Carl does. I also have, by the way, a Samsung Galaxy watch like BP Tony here, because it gives me a host of functions other than just giving you the time and the date. It shows me what my appointments are for the day, how much or how little sleep I had the night before, how much calories I burned, when I need to stand and walk, when I need to perform breathing exercises with a breathing app. And it tells me how excited I am at the moment because it gives me my pulse rate. And it also lets me take a call on the fly like Dick Tracy. I think I might have made a pitch for Apple Watch there. But I agree. Nothing beats seeing an elegant timepiece on the wrist of someone else. It's an investment for sure. And it says something about the wearer, perhaps, as someone who has quote unquote arrived or who has made it. I call it a flashy sports car on one's wrist. And Carl says it can also be a journey. But the basic function of a timepiece is still to tell time, to give time. In the same way that we Rotarians, as men and women of action, are expected to give and to provide. Apart from the 2 other T's of treasure and talent, we are also asked to give our time for humanitarian service projects in order to make an impact in the communities that we serve. In this sense, I can say that Rotarians are like timepieces, in that we need to give or spend time engaged with others and in serving others. I would like to think that Rotarians are timepieces who are more of function and substance than of form. And if time is the most valuable thing that a man can, or a woman can spend, then time spent doing good or doing service is time that is well spent and is not wasted at all. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Makati, our aunts, our lovely aunts, our special guest, our IVP Valarie Wafer, our District Governor Georgie Tan, the other Rotarians from the different Rotary clubs in the district, especially my classmates, my life-changing presidents, our life-changing presidents, and all the other guests in attendance, please accept, Carl, our heartfelt gratitude. As tokens of our appreciation, we are giving you this 55th coffee table book. This contains achievements of our club for the past 5.5 decades. And together with, where is the bottle of vino? Yes, a bottle of wine for you to enjoy while browsing our book. Aside from the wine in the book, we are giving you this plaque of appreciation. It has a replica of a steel plate with your name on it. It will be planted, it will be put in a reef bud that will be planted in the Sea of Narvacan. This is part of our Save Our Reefs project, which I explained earlier was a major environmental initiative that was initiated during the term of immediate past President Peter Manzano. This is in line with Rotary's new and 7th area of focus, which is to save the environment, and it helps revive and regenerate nearshore marine ecosystems. So again, thank you.
Thank you, President Louie. Before we close, I would like to call up a couple of people to give messages. First of all, can I ask Governor Georgie Tan to give a short message?
Thank you, Director Eddie. Good afternoon. I'll go straight without the protocols because we've had too much protocol for the day. You know, any Rotary dignitaries that visit our district, their visit would never be complete without a visit to the grounds, the holy grounds of the Rotary Club of Makati. A 56-year-old club, the strongest club of our district. Rotary has been working to eradicate polio for more than 30 years. Since 1979, we have vaccinated more than 2.5 billion children around the world. A visit to the launching site in these hallowed grounds for the first 3H grant, 3H stands for Health, Hunger, Humanity grant, where the first oral polio drops were delivered to a child by past Rotary International President, James Bomar. And that can be quite a visit to the grounds, which is right here, and the marker, which marks that significant event in the life of any Rotarian, can be quite an unforgettable experience. That proved to the world, in fact, that the initiative to end polio can be pursued. And precisely to this day, we rally behind the advocacy, the legacy project of Rotary International to possibly eradicate only the second disease in the world next to smallpox, and that is polio. And we are this close to ending polio, as you know. Now, RC Makati, or Rotary Club of Makati, is a club pillar among Rotary clubs, a bastion of strength to our district, and a support group to many communities it serves. I have only superlatives for the Rotary Club of Makati, as you know, as a fan of this club. And of course, of my life-changing president, Louie Aseoche. Sorry, I lost it, okay. So, I'd like to thank all of you for having us today. for moving your meeting that is set every Tuesday to a Wednesday just to accommodate our special guest from Rotary International. As you know, we may not have the president of Rotary International with us, but we have the vice president. And I'm so proud that she's female. You know, she was in my top 3 list of my wish list of possible Rotary International President's representatives. So I thank President Shaker for acceding to the request of our district to send her over. Now, the visit of RI Vice President, RI Director, and our Rotary International President's representative, Valarie, and spouse, Mark. This is definitely a shot in the arm of all Rotarians in our district. It energizes and inspires our Rotary clubs in general to pursue service, mindful of our members' diverse backgrounds, and of that sense of equity and inclusivity that we in our district promote. And you know that she is only Rotary International's lead DEI policy champion and thought leader. And these are the values that she espouses as she visits our district. Our district embraces those principles of DEI as we seek to operationalize those principles to heighten our fellowship even more, our servant leadership, and the excellence that we pursue in our organization. I know that RIVP Valarie will inject global, in-depth, and up-to-date perspectives to those thrusts and to the many thrusts of Rotary International, the policies and the programs of RI as we know them. They will allow us, her visit will allow us to see how we as a district and how our Rotary clubs can move in step with Rotary. In turn, her visit will give Rotary International, I would think, a microscopic view on how Rotary clubs in the Philippines deliver impact in our humanitarian service to communities in need, how we thrive and have thrived in the midst of challenges and a pandemic, a raging pandemic. So allow me, please, to introduce to you our special guest from Rotary International. She joined Rotary in 2005 in order to precisely fuel her passion for making an impact that matters. She was district governor of RI District 7070, covering the Greater Toronto area in 2013-2014. Now residing in Thornbury, her home club is the Rotary Club of Collingwood, South Georgian Bay in RI District 7010. Her journey as a Rotarian has involved a number of international roles. She is an international trainer, a member of the host organizing committee for the Toronto 2018 Rotary International Convention. She has represented RI presidents in the US, Norway, and Nigeria. Currently, she is an elected member of the RI Board of Directors for 2020-2022. During her tenure as a Rotarian, she has engaged in and led many initiatives, including a mission to Kosovo with a Gift of Life International. She was the vocational training team leader to Australia in 2010, focusing on young mental health, a national immunization day in India in 2012, and has traveled to Kenya and Tanzania to audit long-term Rotary Foundation grant activity. In her non-Rotary life, Valarie had a 27-year career as the owner of 17 restaurants in Toronto. The brand, Tim Hortons, is the most recognized and iconic franchise in Canada. The Wafer's operation was best known for its inclusive hiring practices and accessibility. As the chair of RI Global DEI Task Force, RI VP Valarie brings a strong background of learned and lived experience to this very important topic. So she and her husband of 35 years, Mark, are Paul Harris Fellows, Bequest Society members, and major donors to the Rotary Foundation. Now, Mark is a disability rights activist. Until recently, he was the owner of 14 successful Tim Hortons restaurants in Toronto. He is an internationally recognized expert on the economics of inclusion, an advisor to the Government of Canada, to the Government of Ontario, and he is responsible for Canada's National Disability Employment Strategy, as well as the reform of basic income for Canada's disabled. He is also an honorary Canadian citizenship judge. Today, Mark spends most of his time on DEI, as expected, initiatives. He is an alumnus of Cornell University, a member of the Rotary Club of Whitby Sunrise, and the co-founder of the Rotary Club of World Disability Action. He has received many awards and recognitions for his work, most notably from Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. He was inducted into the Canadian Disability Hall of Fame in 2014. A prolific connector of people, Mark has raised almost $60 million in the disability and broader nonprofit sector. He's also a race car driver and the 2008 Canadian Historic Sports Car Champion. So they have two daughters, Megan and Colleen, and they had their first grandchild, as of 1 month ago, and her name is Claire. So fellow district mates, let us all please welcome RI Vice-President, RI Director, our Rotary International President's Representative, Valarie K. Wafer.
Thank you so much. I think District Governor Joji, your introduction will be longer than my comments. Very, very generous introduction, and it is incredible to be with you. We arrived last night. It is our very first visit to the Philippines, and we are very, very excited to be with you. And I too am a brand new fan of the Rotary Club of Makati. I am absolutely blown away, absolutely blown away. Had the opportunity to meet with your board before this meeting happened. And again, thank you very much for adjusting your meeting. It's very much appreciated. I would not have wanted to miss out on this experience. And I am just so incredibly inspired by the work that you do in this club, and you have for 56 years. You know, we talk about the last 2 years being a very challenging time in history. And there's 3 reasons why people are joining Rotary today. And it's because of strong leadership, it's because of service, and it's about having goals and knowing where we want to go. And this club excels at all of that. And I truly bow down to you and all that you've accomplished. And the way you're using your public relations and public image, you know, it's not just this beautiful print that shows and keeps your members informed of what's going on, but it's those great news clips that you're putting together, because that visual and the sharing the stories is so important for our Rotary members to really understand what we're all about. So I bring greetings. I bring greetings from President Shaker, President Shaker Mehta, who has a presidential conference this weekend in Hyderabad. And I told him I couldn't be there because I can't be 2 places at once. And he really, I think it's his last presidential conference before we meet in Houston. I bring greetings from the board, and I bring greetings from the Rotary Foundation trustees and Chair John Germ. This is an incredible district and an incredible club again. 100% every Rotarian every year. Give yourself a round of applause. We do not hear that very often. You know, the list of your donors, the list, your per capita giving is through the roof. It really is. I don't see that very often. I was very impressed. I was trying to scribble notes as the PowerPoint was going through the board meeting today. I would love a copy of that PowerPoint. It's so impressive. Again, thank you so much for hosting us. And I want to thank the Rotary clubs that are hosting us this afternoon and that will for the 2 weeks or the week and a half that we're here. We have just felt the love from the minute that we landed. I was met actually at the doorway of the airplane. And I said to the person introduced themselves to me as a Rotarian. And I said, how did you get this far? Like right onto the gangplank. She goes, I work at the airport. And everyone who met us after that worked at the airport. And so we were greeted and certainly expedited very quickly last night, which was very nice. It has never been more exciting to be a Rotarian and be in Rotary than it is today. It was mentioned that I was district governor in 2013-14. And at that time, we knew, especially in North America, where our membership is really suffering, that we needed to change. And so many of us were changing under the radar. We were doing things that weren't necessarily accepted by our council on legislation or in our bylaws. Today, change is front and center. And I just came from the Council on Legislation last year, which is our triennial legislative process. I can tell you that 3 dominant themes emerged from that meeting. It was flexibility, it was innovation, and it was diversity, equity, and inclusion. I cannot thank, as the chair of the Rotary International DEI Task Force, we started on this journey to support our clubs and our members in being more inclusive and providing that equitable opportunity for all of us to show up as we are and be successful and have that chance in leadership. To hear that overarching theme presented in almost each of the enactments at COL last week just made me so proud of the work being done, because the DEI Task Force and Rotary International will provide the leadership, but a true culture change will begin with you. It begins in your unique communities. It begins in your unique clubs. That's how we change culture. That's how we invite those currently not with us in Rotary to join us in Rotary. It's not a top-down effort. It's you that is going to make the difference. And so hearing the amount of conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion at the COL globally from our organization is the reason why we're doing this. It's going to make us more relevant to the generation that comes before us, behind us, and the one that is before us, because our current members, I hear all the time, do not feel that they can truly show up as their true authentic selves. So I want to thank you for all that you're doing. And please, I'm here to have these conversations with you. I learn something every day when I hear about what the clubs are doing. Again, I just want to really say thank you for welcoming us. I want to thank you for stepping up, not only during COVID and everything that you've done to support your communities, but for the last 56 years. I'm very, very impressed. I'm very inspired. And I know that that's probably going to be words that I use for the next week and a half as we travel along around to other Rotary clubs. So thank you so much for welcoming us. And I look forward to seeing you at the conference on the weekend if you're there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that inspirational speech, ma'am. President Louis, I'd now like to call you to adjourn the meeting.
This will just be short. Your hosts this afternoon have been giving me dagger looks and pointing at their respective timepieces, telling me that time's up. But then, President Valarie, you couldn't leave the club until we give you our plaque of appreciation as well. Right. So apart from that, our coffee table book, I hope it fits into your, yeah. I hope it fits into your luggage. We're skipping the bottle of wine because it would add additional poundage on your luggage. But then I hope you would be able to carry this coffee table book and also the replica of the steel plate that will be put in the Rafe Bud. All right, so, and then the banner and also our banner. Yes. And of course, past district governor Lee, we also have something for you. Hopefully, we can have partnerships together. And apart from grants, I think you may also want to toss in some of the watches that you have in your collection. So, so PDG Lee, we are giving you also this coffee table book. This is our milestones for the past 5.5 decades, along with, again, also a replica of the steel plate in the rifa that will be planned in the city of Navacan. So, and also our banner. Thank you very much for your time. So, I think that's it. So, do I go straight to the adjournment? So, this productive meeting, thank you very much for your presence, is hereby adjourned.